Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Darwinian Delusions, and today we're going to be discussing China, culprit or carer. And with me today is Arslan Hidayat. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to everyone.
How are you
Hope
doing,
you're all safe.
How are you?
Alhamdulillah. Yourself?
Very good. Alhamdulillah, I'm doing well. I've seen that you're very, busy nowadays, updating
Yeah.
everyone on Twitter about
Yeah.
the latest developments from East Turkestan, and also just to do with the coronavirus and how it's affecting the Uyghurs. So, why I asked you to come on to the live today is, Arsalan, China is trying to show itself to the world as a carer, that we are a carer. We're sending medical supplies. We're sending, personal protection equipment or whatever they're sending, right? And also, any infections which are actually basically happening is because other countries, their people are coming to ours, right? So they're trying to give this image as a protector. And obviously, the World Health Organization is repeating their narrative.
Yeah.
And then on the other end, you get the likes of Trump, who recently said, China, well, he's been saying a lot of things. So over the last couple of weeks, he's been saying China did a cover up. China did not let us know. China has been messing around with the figures. We can't trust basically the information that's coming out of China. And recently, he said, I mean, prior to this, he was one step. He didn't go that far. So previously, he said, well, if China dealt with it properly, it wouldn't have left China, and it wouldn't infect the rest of the world, right? But recently, he said it's infected 184 countries. We're all suffering, and if we find out that China has been deliberately negligent, there are going to be consequences. And that is a very serious threat. So we get China as a culprit and China as a carer. So where do you fit here? What do you think China's role is?
Well, I would say let's look at what actually happened. Let's look at when all of this started and how long it took for China to act. Because why is Trump and the likes of him saying these things? Because if we look at the timeline of how all of this came about, it is quite, he has the right, and others also do have the right to say this. We can see, and it's been documented, that this virus, this Chinese virus, started late November 2019. That's why it's called COVID-19, because it started in 2019. And initially, this that they thought this virus was a second version of SARS. And actually, I've got the dates right here. On December 1st, 2019, the first case is actually recorded of a man with symptoms of very high pneumonia. And he was, you know how they made it out to be from this wet market or this seafood market? He was actually not from there. And there were around 41 cases with in a similar situation. So, and then you've got various cases. You've got the 10th of December, where it was reported in the Wall Street Journal only on March the 6th of 2020 that a 57-year-old merchant working had contracted the disease on December 10. And this was all recorded, but it took another good 3 months, almost 3.5 months to be recorded. So this is where this is coming from. And then we have the popular doctor, that the first whistleblower who officially came out because of all these cases during December. He officially made a report on the 30th of December 2019, 2 years before New Year's Day, that he had official tests of people coming in, and it was all recorded, and he himself named it SARS Part 2 or SARS-CoV-2, and he was sharing this information within, you know how we have WhatsApp groups, but he was sharing on WeChat. It's a very popular social media app, and he was sharing amongst doctors all these reports. Those hospital reports eventually went on social media Chinese pages, because they haven't got like access to Facebook or Instagram like us. They went on social media all over China. In 2 or 3 days, he and his colleagues got official warnings saying, you're a rumor mongerer, you got to stop this, this is not true. So, and this is all documented. It's clear cut. Later on, China, the doctor eventually died because he himself got the virus, and they eventually changed their tune, and he ended up being a hero. But the Chinese themselves saying we should have listened to those rumors. It's actually quoted by court. So China have no footing on this, and that's why they've been trying to place the blame on the United States. They even went and tried to say, calling it the Italian virus because of the amount of cases there. So that's why Trump had hit back initially, this controversial phrase, Chinese virus, whereas he's just trying to say it came from China. But now, with everything, I'm sure I sent you a link last week about, now I have nothing to do with biology, but there was clear-cut evidence that this was made in some sort of lab because the way that the protons were built up, and yeah. I mean, it's all on paper, it's all recorded.
What's interesting about this is that obviously it's undeniable, like you said, that Dr. Lee spoke out on WeChat. There's actually cases going back to November, and then other cases early December. And in fact, the pre-whistleblower who gave Lee the information, she's also disappeared. She's completely gone off. So we've got all this information clearly showing that China's done a cover-up here, right? Now, what's interesting is that in January, and this is bizarre, really, really bizarre, right? In January, the UK wanted to shut down flights from Wuhan, right? And somebody from the Chinese government basically came out and said that's completely unnecessary. We don't need to do that. And they hit back at the UK for doing that. And the World Health Organization actually put out a statement in January saying there's no clear evidence for human-to-human transmission, right? Which, if human-to-human transmission, if we've got no clear evidence for it, then it's not really that dangerous, right? Because you'd have to be a bat or whatever it is. But clearly, all the way, if we go back to early December, that's weeks ago, doctors knew it was human-to-human transmission because they actually got it themselves, right? What clearer evidence do you need than that? They weren't dealing with bats. They were dealing with other human beings, and they managed to get it. And if that was enough as a smoking gun, if you look at the actual the flights which are coming out of Wuhan, and they're flying off to Italy, they're flying here, they're flying there. When China finally admitted that there's a pandemic and it's human-to-human transmission, they couldn't deny it anymore. That's why they said it, because there's people dying in Italy. And you see, I just want to highlight something here, and I know you've got a lot more information than I do on this, but I just wanted to highlight the ridiculousness of using the race card. So the Chinese started putting out this idea that it's racist. It's racist. You don't be racist towards us. And in Italy, just before things got really bad, right near the beginning, right, they did this campaign, these YouTubers, where Chinese people stood out and they would hug a Chinese person, and Italians would go and hug them. Right? And this is on YouTube, right? And this was supported by the council of that city. Now, that's absolutely ridiculous, and the Chinese knew exactly what was happening. I mean, and they, for political reasons, they wanted to do a sort of cover up. Now, once all of this is over, all of this situation is over, do you think the relationship between China and the rest of the world will go back to the way it was pre-COVID-19?
So I'll get to this question. Just remind me, but I just want to talk about a couple of things that you mentioned.
Sure.
That when they actually hit January, and that first sort of official report by Dr. Lee, after that they were warned not to spread these rumors. Within that week, they actually found out that it was human-to-human transfer, but that they had controlled the issue. Now in China, you have to understand how their mentality works. There's this thing, and a lot of Westerners who have lived a very long time in China will understand this. And this also, we talked about this last time as well, that for China, there is something called this Mianzi mentality. Mianzi is face. China never ever want to lose. It's a very big thing.
Yeah.
And another thing is that China, the way that they control their people is that they say that the government and the people are inseparable. So, for example, you're a British citizen.
Yeah.
If I were to, or if the media were to shame Boris Johnson or shame the UK government in any way, you'd be like, okay, so what? But for a Chinese person, if you shame the leader or you shame the government, it is an attack on them.
Yeah.
They're not too. So, and then the next day, the Chinese government will come out and say, look, nasty foreigners, America, our enemy, has attacked all of us. So the people, especially the people that lived during Mao's time and that sort of older generation, cannot grasp or differentiate between the two. So an attack on the government is attack on the whole of China. So when Trump or others say Chinese virus, when they totally mean the CCP, you guys didn't control it, it's an attack on everyone.
Yeah.
And I'll digress just a little bit. The people who are saying, don't use this term all around the world, these Chinese people that have nothing to do with politics, well, what about when for years the concentration camps were open? Technically, the Uyghurs are Chinese citizens on paper, your fellow Chinamen, technically. You don't raise voice for concern then, and now suddenly what? I mean, it's not to say that people were not attacked, but it's nothing compared to the concentration camps. Yeah. Now, if we go back to the question, what was the question? Oh yeah, the relationship now. Well, the crazy thing now is I'm not sure, because initially when the virus did come out, we thought this is the end of China. People are going to finally boycott. The sort of boycott we wanted for the concentration camps, it's only happening now because it's affected so many countries, as we mentioned. It's getting to a stage where in Australia we have a big company, an airline company called Virgin Australia Airline. You may have heard of this. They're losing lots of money because of the virus, and there are many companies in the same situation. Chinese companies are buying these guys up now. China is buying these assets up. So besides it looks like that if this keeps on going, that we may, how we've always needed China and our economies are intertwined, it may just continue to be that way, because now China are making money off this instead of what we thought this would be the end of the communist regime and all this, but it looks like they're profiting it from a lot. Because even though, yes, China's economy has gone down, all of the world's economies have gone down together. The trick is, or the game changer would be, how quick the economy is going to get back up. And this could be a change, like, during World War II, government, like taking land, and, it was like a real, who's going to be in power for the next 100 years or so. This could be that moment now. So that's how I would look at it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think this is extremely important, because when I think about this, Arslan, the world order is changing, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Things are not going to go back to normal. But there is something which I want to highlight here. And that thing is that I have seen people who are Trump supporters, and also people who are leftists, people who are normally very PC and whatnot. They're all coming together and they're all saying what China has done is absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah.
And that type of unity, I have never seen. So, for example, you probably heard of Bill Maher, right? He is a famous American comedian, very anti-Muslim, very anti-Trump, right? He made this viral video yesterday in which he was so angry. Yeah. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen him that angry. Yeah.
Yeah.
He said, we look up to scientists, right? And we look at scientists as role models. And it is ridiculous that scientists are breaking their own rules. So when Ebola came out of Africa, we called it Ebola because of the Ebola river. When MERS came out of the Middle East, we called it MERS. Likewise, every single place that a virus comes from, we will call it that particular destination, right? Wherever it originated from. And he said, well, what the hell's going on? We know where it came from, right? What is this nonsense that we are not even going to call it that? Because, and that just shows you the attitude towards, say, Africa, right? Yeah, it's fine. Let's just call it African virus, Ebola virus. The Chinese, they have so much influence that Westerners are basically saying, no, we can't call it the CCP virus. We can't call it Wuhan virus. We need to call it something else. And something else that I was thinking about is that when we look at the dawah and we look at, us trying to build a relationship with people, and in the Western world, we have great freedom of speech. We have all these ways that we can communicate and we can do these types of things. And to a larger or smaller extent, all across the world, you have some level of freedom of speech, right? You have some level of freedom of speech. A lot of people don't recognize that you have absolutely zero freedom of speech in China. I was watching, and maybe you're aware of this, on, Vice News, right? They're very left, right?
Yeah.
They recently put out a video, which I was very proud of them because normally they always are like being politically correct. Like I would expect them in this time to be taking China's side. They put out a video of a reporter from Wuhan who was documenting these cases when they were coming out. And that doctor made journalist, he made a viral video in which he basically swore. He said, I don't give a whatever, you can kill me, I'm going to tell the truth, right? And he disappeared. His father the next day had an intelligence officer that came to him and said, your son's been put into quarantine. And that was 2 months ago, and no one's heard from him. Most likely dead. So we need to understand that this is a very dangerous situation for all of us, right? I mean, this is a threat to all of us. And while we are, sort of being very comfortable, and prior to this virus breaking out, what we are going through is like 0.001% of what the Uyghurs are going through, because they are basically in real concentration camps and we're in our little houses and we're comfortable. But the way I see things is that this particular situation is going to be very beneficial, I believe, for the Uyghur cause, right? Because I could think all across the world, people are going to look at ways to try and get back at China, right? Politically, economically, whatnot. And this is going to be a perfect opportunity to actually ask for their rights.
Well, I hope so, because right now the world is in sort of like a selfish mode. As I mentioned before, I see it, I hopefully it doesn't happen, but I see it as, honestly, it'll go back to business as usual, because I talked about this with the UN, actually, and the world knows this, and the UN knows this, how the UN have China on the Human Rights Council, where they will now monitor and dictate how human rights violations or what is a human rights violation. They will, write the rule book on this now. So, I mean, I hope so. I'm not really hopeful, but I don't think it's still hit people hard enough. As I say, for me, it's a blessing in disguise. But people will, coming from Islamic perspective, people are not going to understand that from a Western perspective. What do you mean it's a blessing in disguise? Because so far, 70,000 people have died, innocent people. But I mean, it really is scary. I mean, I don't think this virus has hit us hard enough yet for people not to wake up, and I can just foresee that nothing's going to happen to China. And when you mentioned Bill Maher's video of saying, how come we're not calling the Chinese virus? Well, we know now why they don't want it to be called the Chinese virus, because they don't want to be blamed. We're seeing lawsuits from from all over the world, $1 trillion, I believe it was 350 odd billion pounds that the UK government are asking for. So in the end, again, it's face. China knows that if this is totally blamed upon them, that they're going to lose a lot, in companies wanting to invest in China. There was recently the United States called for a lot of companies to actually leave China, but China is saying no, they're bound by a contract to stay the next 4 or 5 years, and if they don't, then we're going to hold on to all investments, like any of the companies that they built. They're going to hold on to all that. So it is. Yeah, it's this big money game, a big trade-off happening here. And again, it's going to boil down to money. Again, there's going to be some sort of deal match. And yeah.
I've been reading up on some of, politicians and also strategists and thinkers who are basically talking about this. And you're right. At the end of the day, if you want to know where things are headed, you have to chase the money and see, okay, what's going to happen in this way. And you're right. China's buying, potentially going to buy Virgin Air. You're originally from Australia, born and bred, so you understand fully well that how the Chinese utilize freedom of speech and the system in Australia to actually influence Australian politics in favor of China. All of these things, and they're going to keep doing this. They're going to do this in the UK. They're going to do this in America. However, I feel right now they've sort of overplayed their hand, right? They've sort of overplayed their hand. What do I mean by that? What I mean by that is that, say, for example, while this virus was going on and certain things were happening, right? I would say the anger against China, of course, it was rising. But when China claimed that this virus was actually spread by the US Army, which is absolutely ridiculous, that just automatically put the entire Trump administration and all of them into this like mode of like, we're going to get them back. How dare they can say that? And then they didn't call it the Chinese virus until that point. Then they started saying that. And I've been reading some analysts who basically say, firstly, that there's already a Cold War between the United States and China, and this could potentially make it a hot war. This particular thing. And you have to remember also that we are right at the beginning. We've got another year to 18 months, right? Right in the beginning of a crisis, people are still a bit composed, But when things start getting really bad, that's when we're going to start to see. And already, I think China's already overplayed its hand by essentially making a threat to withhold medical equipment, which America's already paid for it to be shipped to America, right? And one Chinese analyst in a state-run, whatever you call it, a newspaper, if you don't call it that, he basically threatened to throw America into the sea of the virus, by holding back the equipment. I mean, this type of rhetoric. I mean, I'm sure you're aware of this. That there was even a restaurant which put up this thing about Japan and this other place that. So we're seeing the real side of China. China CCP before this, they were pretending to be nice, but now we're starting to see that vicious side, and I think they've overplayed their hand.
Yeah. So together with the Chinese virus, we talked about this. They let that sort of anti-American thing fly within their social media. And everyone knows, or most people should know, that if you post anything anti-China on their social media pages, it gets taken down straight away. People are, whenever you open an account, you're tracked with your number. Your number is linked to your ID number, and you'll get a knock on the door. Especially foreigners. Every foreigner has some sort of minder. I mean, that's how strong their police force or security forces are. They purposely let this fear mongering, they let it fly because they could have easily stopped it. Now, recently, what have we been seeing with the Africans? Now, Africans, the Chinese general population, they don't differentiate between Egypt and South Africa or the Congo, and you know what I mean? Africa is Africa. It's a black African. That's what they think. So even for like say white South Africans, they're treated the same way as black South Africans over there. And I'm sure you've seen those viral videos of Africans being kicked out, them being blamed for the virus because they had Ebola a few years ago. Guess what they've started to do? Damage control. They've started to put these Africans into hotels, like proper quarantine, giving them gifts, giving them flowers. And so now China realizes, as you said, their evil side has come out, and I'm not sure if they can still save face, but I mean, not many people are woke or switched on. Again, the layman will buy into this, and they'll accept, or they'll kind of understand that, you know, this is okay. I mean, to hold up signs, again, let's think Chinese mentality. Do you remember the popular video of the McDonald's that had no blacks? In China, that's very normal. So like no blacks. For us, it's like, you know, we've lived in this age where, you know, civil rights and political correctness, like no way you're going to write that. But in China, it's very normal to say those things. And even the word for the N-word in Chinese, if you directly translate it, it's literally black monster. 黑鬼 means the N-word, but if you were to directly translate it, it's black monster, and it's just what they say. Or like 黑人, like black person, and what they did was, I talked about this last time with the 50 Cent social media army. They're not making comments anymore. They're going out on videos, and they did this with Turkey, they did this with Iran, they did this with a few countries. Fidro Jayo, which means Africa, stay strong. And they were doing this with many countries that were affected. Italy, stay strong. And this support and the people, and these guys are all paid. So there is some sort of damage control going on. They're kind of stepping back. Like you said, they went a bit too far. Now they're kind of stepping back. And now China are calling for cooperation with the United States. This has always been China's strategy, to always buy time, and if they feel that they've gone too far, they take a step back and try and get allies. And even right now, the big thing within China is foreigners. So putting all this blame on foreigners. And remember, we talked a few weeks ago saying that there will be this second wave of the virus. And who are they blaming? These evil, dirty foreigners from Africa and the United States they bring in, but they don't realize that these foreigners that are coming back are 95% Chinese nationals that were living overseas anyway. So, yeah.
I mean, you know, one thing which I really want everybody to understand here is that social media is a tool which we don't recognize is that important unless you live in China and you're suffocated. Yeah. I want you guys to understand something, that every single time you post something about East Turkestan, and we should call it East Turkestan, it's derogatory to call it Xinjiang, but we only do that to introduce the topic, it hurts them. It hurts them financially, it hurts them in terms of what we're doing. Every single day I've tried to make myself consistent and put up something about East Turkestan, and this is what I found really surprising. I got negative messages, and I'm thinking, normally I'm cussing atheists, I'm cussing these people, those people, and what's going on here? Why am I? You see, you only have to just go out there and just start posting some stuff about East Turkestan. Watch, you're going to get these people attacking you, and you're going to be like, what's going on? And I'll tell you something, Arslan, look, I'm going to say something, right? And I'm not conspiratorial, but I'll be very honest with you. They'll have Muslim names.
Yes.
They won't just be like Zhao or something, right? They'll have Muslim names. They'll have different flags. You think they're from a different country, but they're actually trolls. They're actually trolls, right? And they'll repeat things. They'll repeat things. They'll repeat things. And you can see what's going on. So we have the power. I want everybody to realize this, that we have the power. I mean, just the other day, Arslan, you put up a tweet in Africa where a Chinese person is teaching African children Chinese, and without them knowing, he's basically teaching them, I am ignorant and I'm a black monster, something like this. Yeah, that video, I want to know why that video isn't on news channels. Yeah, why that video isn't here, isn't there. I feel that the infiltration of the CCP into the institutions, including the media, including, for example, China Watch, right? China Watch is is something paid for by the CCP, and it was actually published in the Washington Post, in the Guardian, mainstream newspapers paid for by the CCP. Just, I think 2 days ago, the Guardian basically said we're no longer going to have this section called China Watch, which they've been running for 10 years. So China's not dumb. They're not just sitting back and sending out these trolls. They're infiltrating universities, they're infiltrating companies, and through this soft power, yeah? And there's actually an American general with the name Robert Spalding. You might have heard of him.
Yeah.
And he's exposed this. He's exposed this entire network, and they absolutely hate him. And I'm so glad during this virus that he's getting a lot more attraction. He's on TV all the time, doing interviews all the time, and people are starting to wake up.
Yeah, as I said, it was only this sort of thing, like people have not been paying attention to China because China doesn't affect them, because the news that you get out of China is 5,000 year history, Great Wall of China. Even for Muslims, we talk about some Sahaba, second or third generation, they went there, they give dawah, and it's all these positive things, and it's always been unknown. And even when we talk about these trolls, this was written 2015, 16, and how much money they spend. The reason why things like those videos are not reported as much, because in the West's mind, they think these are just normal Chinese people. And why should we be recording it? They're just a bunch of racists that are doing it. They don't see it as, like, if we did something like that, we can be separated from our governments. Again, China puts government and people together, but in the West, government and people are separate things. Like, you can hate Trump and still love America. So when these types of videos come out, or you see thousands and thousands of comments, even when Kobe Bryant died, you should have seen the comments that they were saying. When he died, those people that sell shoes and shirts online, that they make a bit of profit. So these guys, their main thing was they sold Kobe Bryant products, shoes, shirts. They were like, hey, you black N-word, why didn't you tell me that you were going to die? I was going to buy a lot more of your merchandise. Now your merchandise is worth a lot more now. Like, so many, but again, the West doesn't pick up on that. They think it's just normal people. I mean, there are normal people around them, but it's these trolls, and the government, again, allows this to fester. If they wanted, they could have stopped it right then and there. They allowed anything. This censorship, if you're woke in any way, it's real. If you see anything that's been allowed to fester, it means the Chinese government wants it that way. They want that information out there. Anything that's been allowed to, and you can try it. Download WeChat, type in the word East Turkestan, and it will be deleted straight away. You can try it. You can physically.
Or TikTok.
Or TikTok. Well, TikTok's okay because I've been able to share anti-China stuff, but the Chinese version of TikTok called Douyin, no, your stuff gets taken off that.
No, yeah. So I wanna play the devil's advocate here, because a lot of people are, and I've actually, even a friend of mine criticized me for speaking out the way I am about China and with these types of things, and people are thinking like, what, like. I want to put some questions to you, which is straight out of the mouth of the CCP, which then people start repeating without realizing it, okay? So firstly, and we've actually got this question on this chat itself, right? Which is, did the Uyghurs actually revolt against China?
Okay, when you talk about revolt, what does the word revolt mean? Because we are a nation with our own land. So we have been in, forget 70 years. 1949 is when the Chinese communists came in. Before that, we had the Chinese nationalists. So the people of Taiwan, okay, for now, they're my friend. But the Chinese Nationalist Party in Taiwan, they murdered thousands and thousands of Uyghurs as well. To us, whatever power or whatever, whether they call themselves Democratic Chinese, Communist Chinese, Socialist Chinese, for us, at the end of the day, they're all our enemy. So we've been dealing with the Chinese since the Qing Dynasty, 1760. So that land, East Turkestan, is our land. They came in, they occupied it. So anything now, when the Chinese came in, now we understand that, empires come and go. Even the Islamic Empire, the Ottoman Empire, had taken over many lands all over 3 continents. But your haq, your rights are given. From day 1 or day 2, the Chinese Communist Party gave the Uyghurs their rights. The independence movement, or wanting to be separate from China, wouldn't be as strong as today.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, there are many countries, or there are many cultures in the world that live under a government and they are able to live freely. There may be like a very tiny population of people wanting to be independent or separate, but it's not as strong because many people say practicing their culture, their religion freely. So this is what we would say. So I mean, for example, this time, so this month is April, exactly 30 years ago, there was something called the Baran Massacre. And this happened in the month of Ramadan. In the month of Ramadan, the Chinese government came into Baran and they were signing up people to get their babies aborted because they wanted to find, even though the 1-child policy or the 2-child policy was written in law in 1980, 1979, it didn't take until another good 10 years for it to be implemented in Turkestan. Thousands of women were killed, babies were aborted. I mean, and this is what you would see natural, wanting to protect your property, your family, your livelihood, basically.
And the thing about the Baran Massacre is and I want everybody to understand this, that East Turkestanis are not Chinese. I mean, you look at them, the Turkic people, they are totally distinct. And they've been Muslim for longer than Islam's been in parts of India. So this
Can I just add something?
Sorry?
Can I just add something? You guys can totally check this out. The Uyghurs are the first Turkic people out of all the Turks to accept Islam. We established the first Islamic kingdom under Sultan Satuk Burahan. You guys can look this up. First Islamic Turkic kingdom.
Absolutely. And the thing about this particular idea that, okay, they're revolting, or firstly, is their land, right? They're independent people, independent language. Secondly, empires come and go, and the brutalization is what's causing this issue. But I want you guys to just recognize something. Please recognize something, Firstly, the Baran Massacre, it began with the people who were being told you need to get your children aborted, not by them picking up weapons, not by them going around killing. They actually went to do a peaceful protest. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine your land's been taken over, right? And you decide to do a peaceful protest, and then they send in gunships, tanks, troops, and they do a massacre. Based on what? You doing a peaceful protest, right? So I want everyone to understand here, did the Uyghurs actually revolt is not even a question. Because revolt would be if, for example, you have, I don't know, a part of the UK and people are revolting against their government. This is a foreign occupation. And these are people who are simply saying, stop killing our children, stop raping our women. They are Chinese soldiers who are staying in the houses of the people of East Turkestan. What do you think they're doing? I saw a video on TikTok where the guy is forcing a Uyghur woman to dance. You tell me of an Israeli soldier that goes into the house of a Palestinian, a woman, and makes her dance and puts this on TikTok. Watch Amnesty International. Watch Human Rights Watch. Brothers and sisters, I'm telling you guys, right? Israelis have more humane actions than the CCP. Now, you may think, no, that's not possible. I promise you, objectively look at that. The Israelis do not ban the azan. Yeah, the Israelis do not. The level of killing, organ harvesting, forced marriages, kidnap of children. I mean, I have children. Imagine your children being kidnapped and raised as atheists, which is what they're trying to do. Yeah, literally, if you look at the situation, I'm thinking so much noise about Palestine. Of course, we should be speaking about the rights of every people, Muslims and non-Muslims. But about East Turkestan, most people, firstly, they don't know, so I don't blame them.
Yeah.
Secondly, I want you guys to realize something. Yeah, why is it when everybody was silent, everybody in the world was silent about East Turkestan, and then it started, right? And it started from China. Do you not think there's a link that it started from the place where the greatest zulm is happening to Muslims on earth and no one's talking about it? Yeah. And we need to recognize this. Now, I want to push you, Arslan, on another idea which is being pushed out, right? And again,
so before you ask that question, I just want to add a little bit, if that's okay. So, for example, inshallah, Ramadan is coming up next week, yes?
Yes.
In Palestine, are people going to be fasting in Palestine?
Yeah.
Are they going to be stopped by the IDF? Are they going to have their hijab, their beard, their salah, their tarawih, you know, all this, even at home, their Quran, the adhan, all of these things are like you are able to do in Palestine. So as I mentioned in your last time we spoke, we would say, and I'm not saying there's no dhulm in Palestine, there is, but we would say if we Uyghurs had a choice of the dhulm in Palestine to the dhulm in East Turkestan, we would say, Alhamdulillah, please give us the dhulm of the Palestinians.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And the thing which is very important to understand right now is when we're speaking about this particular topic that we're addressing right now, people say, look, this is not a time to come up with conspiracy theories. This is not a time to play a blame game. This is a time for cooperation, which funnily enough is exactly what the CCP has been talking about. But I just want to ask you one clear thing here. For us to say here the same thing which virologists have been saying, the same thing which Trump's been saying, which academics have been saying, that China has basically completely mismanaged the situation, and for us to basically right now say it's the fault of the Chinese, is that like wrong? Is there something wrong with us simply pointing that out? Should we not just cooperate and then blame China afterwards?
It's a very interesting question. I mean, it depends on the situation. How bad is it really? To be honest, I'm not a policymaker, and I don't know. You know, even for us, are we even living in the free world? Are we getting the right information as well? But we should be. China is trying to make it as if, you know what, they still want to be the heroes of the situation.
Yep.
They tried to do this. Look, we've come up with this medication. We've come up with this diet regime. We've come up with these supplies. Use this, and you'll be okay. Look, we've gotten through it. Their death toll is still at 4,300, which is an absolute joke. You can never trust these guys, and you got to be realizing who are you cooperating with. We are, the golden rule is never cooperate or never deal with terrorists. People need to see the CCP as a terrorist state, number one. Number two, China themselves don't have any answers. They don't have resources. It's all, what's the word? It's all face. They look like they're doing something. They look like they're researching. You cooperating with China will get you nowhere anyway. There's no point whether you did or you didn't. You might as well have the West or, you know, the certain allies cooperate and then work on a vaccine. There's no point in cooperating with China.
Yeah.
How can you trust them after all this?
You know, you would think this is a joke, but China, they sent out testing kits, which people actually paid for. It wasn't paid, which actually turned out to be faulty. They sent out face protection, which when people opened up, it was actually women's underwear. That was that's actually stuffed in there. Yeah. So the best you can describe China is somebody who sets the house on fire. Yeah. And while you're next to them and you're like suffocating, they happen to give you a glass of water which is poisoned. Right? Yeah. I mean, it's literally mind-boggling that the narrative. Because remember, there's I've forgotten the name, but I was watching about this. There's a Chinese defector who ran away from the CCP government, and he's hiding in Australia. Yeah. And I've forgotten his name. Maybe you know his name. And he spoke about that China has this two-pronged strategy. On the one end, it's going to pretend to be your friend, and it's going to give you the. On the other end, it's going to be your enemy, and it's going to do everything to undermine you. It's going to do both things at once. Yeah. So right now, they basically are saying we need to cooperate. We need to cooperate. We need to cooperate. Just a few weeks ago, they were saying America's the reason we have this, or this particular thing was caused by the athletes that came over, whatever. And they got these two different approaches going on. And what we got to realize is that if you say things like we need to cooperate with them, you're basically falling for their trick. That is their trick is to say, let's work together, work together, work together. In reality, they're just trying to undermine you. Because, things that we take for granted, simple things that we take for granted, they don't understand those things. Yeah. We think we're on the same logical path. No. Yeah. Yeah. And I want everybody to recognize something. Yeah. China's rise economically is due to the Western nations allowing it to. This is very important. They didn't just make a huge break. There was trade agreements. The whole idea was once they become rich, they're going to open up their country to capitalism, but also open up to democracy and these types of things. And the latter did not happen, but the former happened. They became rich communists, right? It didn't actually work out what they were planning on doing.
So the first sort of major oppression from China that actually flooded our screens was back in 1989, the famous or the infamous Tiananmen Square massacre. But the world 10 years later put them into the WTO. As you mentioned, we're gonna make them into a democracy. So these appeasement policies, we don't want to go back to this. We cannot treat China, as you mentioned, just like a normal team player in the world. We literally got to treat these guys like criminals, like bandits. That's what they are. That's how they came to power in the first place. And instead of getting like your foreign ministries or people like this, and when you're dealing with China, you literally need to have criminologists and things like this. And we need to see China like a rich North Korea. That's what they are.
Yes.
You know, when tourists, when they go on groups and they say we are on a stage tour, but what's crazy is when analysts and investigators go into China, they are, and especially Muslim ones, especially when with the concentration camps, and I've heard of this recently, especially this past few years now, they would call big Muslim organizations, right? They'll set them up in these hotels. There are prayer mats and Al-Quran in the hotels, and they were like, gee, we don't even have Qurans in Turkey or in Pakistan in hotels. They're like, the Muslims here have even more rights than us, and people fall for this. It's amazing. Like you would think that people, this is a stage, there's something going on. All governments know what's up, though. All governments know what's going on, but they're not going to do anything if they're not going to be pressured by the people or by organizations. So China are very smart and very cunning, very foxy when it comes to trying to save face, trying to cover the lies, and they simply can't be trusted at all. Even they come off very nice and cuddly. As I mentioned, when we think Chinese, we think panda bears, we think like things like this, but it's not. That's not the case.
It's not. And I just want everybody to realize how they treat their own people. Yeah, because the greatest victims are the people living within China, the Uyghurs, the Kazakhs, the normal, even Han Chinese people, right? I want to take you back to Taiwan here, right? So Taiwan is a success story, yeah? So when they basically found out that this virus is human-to-human transmission and all of this, right? They put this information out to the WHO, right? The WHO ignored them. And why did they ignore them? Well, because the WHO is a Chinese lackey, which is why Trump recently cut off their funding. Now, the WHO doesn't even recognize the existence of the independent country of Taiwan. It doesn't even recognize it, right? And when Taiwan is basically telling them, listen, human-to-human transmission is happening, we're seeing it happen right before our eyes, all of that information, this is back in December, it's ignored. It's ignored. And I want you to just realize something, right? If there's somebody who's abusive, who's angry, and they are horrible to their own children and their own family, they're going to be a lot worse to the rest of the world. A lot worse, right? So when you look at the history of the CCP and how they, through the Cultural Revolution, they killed millions, right? And throughout time, throughout their government, how they've been killing ethnic groups and all of the various things that they're actually doing, it's not going to be a piece of cake when they actually manage to colonize a large part of the world. Because I see them as an East India company on steroids. Yeah? How did the East India Company take over India? It took over by business deals. It didn't fight everybody. And if you look right now, and you'll find evidence for this, prestigious Western universities have the narrative of the CCP. They literally repeat. Why? Because there's so much funding coming in. Yeah? And they don't realize how deep the rabbit hole actually goes. And we all got to recognize that we all have a role in shouting from the top of our lungs on social media about this. Because right now, I want everybody to understand we have this power. This is a great, great power Allah's blessed us with, social media. And it does hurt them. It hurts them a lot, and we need to keep it up.
Yeah, on that, remember that the World Health Organization is a part of the UN. The United Nations themselves don't recognize Taiwan as an independent state. That's number one. Number two, when you mentioned the power of social media, it's very true, because when you do talk about anti-China or anti-CCP, not just universities. Last week, I read a story of a guy, I think his name is Drew Paolo, at the University of Queensland. He was kicked out. He was expelled from the university because he was being anti-China. He was talking about the Uyghurs. He was talking about all the atrocities going on there. And this is an Australian university. China setting up their...
His parents had the CCP visit him.
Yeah. So, what do you call it? So millions of dollars, like, again, this fondness of China didn't just start overnight. They've been slowly for years, through their investments, through education, through China studies, the ease of being able to go over to China and study for a year or two, all these things. And to be honest, you kind of have to give China credit, like how smart they were, playing the politics, playing on how free and you're able to do this. Like, we can't set up our institutions or say Islamic or say Middle Eastern sort of ideologies in China. They won't let you do it. Where was I? I was and so your video, Subur. So I'm not sure if you make video. I'm not sure if you make money off YouTube or not. But your video will be demonetized if you're speaking anti. Why is YouTube demonetizing videos that are anti-China? So
they even unsubscribing people from anti-Chinese channels like China Uncensored.
Yeah. Like, so this is, when they say social media is a weapon, it's not a cliche. It's a real thing.
I just wanted to highlight something, right? This is exactly what I was talking about. I want you to read these comments out, right? Read this comment.
Yeah.
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 And now read this comment.
Yeah.
Yeah. Read this comment.
Yeah.
Who is this nut fruitcake?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm telling you, bro. Since
still-
I started talking out against the CCP regime, people
Yeah.
like this turn up. I don't recognize this name. I do a live stream every single day.
Yeah.
Somehow on the internet, somebody's like, and he's just literally spamming. I'm not going to ban him. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's spamming. He's just sending Taiwan's. China did not lie. So this is happening in real time.
Yeah.
And remember this, it's costing them money. Like this fruitcake who's leaving these comments, it's costing them money. They're gonna have to pay for more and more and more and more people until it gets to a point where it's untenable. It's actually untenable.
But you have to understand, Sabur, people buy into this. So what happens is, imagine like we're doing this live, there are 1,000 comments, but you'll get like a good 50% or more of this, or 60, 70%. The people who aren't aware of what's going on or are new to this situation, they'll be like, like these comments do play a role. That's why they're doing it. They're not going to waste money. It's very popular that the Chinese in general, and I'm not being racist, are the most frugal people in the world, and so is their government. So that they do this for a very good reason, and other governments also do the same thing. The Iranians are doing it, Turks do it. I'm talking about the government, but not to the level of what the Chinese, like they really mastered it.
Yeah. And while you were talking, he's left another 2 comments, right?
Yeah.
Stop saying Taiwan, and this just gives it away.
Yeah. So he's missed a question mark there. He's trying to say. So USA is better.
Yeah. So what it is that, and here you go. He just left another comment. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what it is, look, this is the proof that we're talking to you about. Yeah. It's fruitcakes like this who think.
Can we say thank you, like for this? Like you just proved what we said.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And what we need to understand is that if we have, and remember, Muslims are all on social media all the time. Yeah. There are certain governments in the world who they would love to impose a ban on social media, but because of freedom of speech and stuff like this, they can't. Policies change because people make noise on social media. Yeah. And if we all collectively start making this noise, start doing this thing. I mean, Arslan, I want you to talk about this particular thing. I've seen on your Twitter, like you have this made in China. You cross it out of products and basically not buying Chinese products, right?
Yeah.
Now, I want to ask you this question directly. When it comes to, say, the Israeli boycott that we do, right? You have to work very hard to find out if something's an Israeli product, So, I think Jordan Valley or whatever it's called, one of these dates, which is supposed to be from Israel or whatever. But if we were to do this, would it really make a difference if people started making noise about don't buy from China?
So what was the idea about the BDS movement? It's basically, like each Coke bottle that you buy or each Starbucks coffee that you buy is like a bullet against the Palestinians. That's how we look at it as well. So you're funding the Chinese communist regime. It has gotten to a point where for the past few years now, stuff that comes out of China is no longer labeled made in China. What do they write? Made in PRC.
Yeah.
What does it stand for? Made from the People's Republic of China. They don't even write China. They write PRC. So to hide this, because it's such a bad, it doesn't look good. So the idea behind that social media campaign was find anything. I mean, I'm living in a place where I didn't buy my TV or many of the products. There's like made in China products. So I would cross out China and write camps, because 4 or 5 months ago, the Australian Strategic Institute policy, the group there, they came up with full research study showing that 83 popular global brands that we all know, Samsung, H&M, G&M, like all these global brands were somehow directly or indirectly using forced Uyghur labor. And so they were named and shamed. And so it came off that, we really need to, if you don't want to fund torture concentration camps and be a part of this, because you're funding this. And even as Muslims, you are buying something and you are oppressing the Muslims directly. That's how I would say it. I'll put the guilt trip on you guys. So, yeah.
No, absolutely, absolutely. It makes a difference. And look, at the end of the day, when I was looking into why the Chinese government covered up the virus, they have a meeting coming up in March, which is the meeting of the Communist Party. Xi Jinping, whatever his name is, Xi Jinping, whatever, he's facing some resistance from within the Communist Party. And they wanted to go into this in a way that, because the way you legitimize your brutal regime is by keeping people financially happy. As long as people are financially happy, they're not going to revolt, right? So they knew this was going to affect the economy, so they were going to try and, play it down as much as possible. Even now, they're sending people back to work, and they're trying to pretend everything's normal, but obviously it's not working out. So economically, China being hit is a real thing. And I want everybody to understand this, that if there's enough of a social media movement, right? And social media movements, look at the Arab Spring, right? It just took off, right? I'm not saying pro or against, I'm just saying it just took off. Or the Me Too movement. When these things start taking off and they start trending, because right now, I want you guys to realize something. Many people, right? The French president, the British president, the American president, many European leaders, many people in Latin America, we're talking about politicians here, they would retweet, Me Too Uyghur. They would retweet it, because right now is the prime time. And I want everybody to realize we may never get this time again. Things may get back to normal. Somebody may discover a vaccine and we may be like, oh, the Chinese, they made a mistake and whatnot. And I was speaking to an academic about China and America, and he gave the example, China's like a farmer and America or the West is like a hunter. Yeah. So the hunter is very impulsive. He sometimes makes a decision, sometimes doesn't make a decision. So in the short run, the hunter always wins. In the long run, the farmer always wins, because the farmer is always taking action, looking at 50 years ahead, 60 years ahead. And the problem, I think, is that the Western world is because it's a hunter and it's used to other hunters, it's not used to this idea of somebody smiling and backstabbing you and taking years to actually do that. And what we need to start to recognize is that by continuously making noise, by continuously repeating the same narrative, it is going to have a significant impact. Don't wait for somebody else to do it. Literally, not to brag about myself, but sometimes when I take a little YouTube clip and I put a little comment on it, a little funky title, sometimes 2-3 days it gets 50,000 views simply because of a title. So use every platform you have to make noise. And by the way, Arslan, while you're talking, a lot of my viewers, they're talking about other trolls who've joined this troll. Because this troll's still talking, but others have actually joined, right? And these guys are...
Join with him or against him?
No, with him.
What happens is, what will happen is, because you've only just started your journey against the Chinese, right? They'll come out full frontal, basically, and it depends how much attention you give them. Okay, so I don't give them any attention. Like we've been giving them a little bit of attention, so they're like, oh, you know what, it's working. So that's why it's happening. But you'll realize that the less attention that you give them, they start to like, oh, you know what, it's not going to work. It's not going to put them off. But the opposite can happen. These guys, for example, I sent you those 2 articles last time about how they can end up promoting you. So this time last year, our Facebook page, if you don't know, for your viewers now, it's called Talk to East Turkestan. It's the most popular Facebook page for the Uyghurs on Facebook. We were attacked by these 50 Cent trolls, and it was a blessing for us. They did take our rating down, but eventually there was a Chinese newspaper, and you guys can find these guys on Twitter, called Global Times. They published how their what's the word? how their patriotic netizens attacked these evil East Turkestani terrorist Facebook page, and then eventually CNN, the CNN ended up interviewing us, and then that's why we've got so many followers, because and I just want to thank them. Yeah.
No, definitely, and there's something about social proof here. Like I was thinking about this, like you said, these comments. Whenever you're watching a YouTube clip, Arslan, the first thing you do is you go down through the comments and you see whether people like it or they don't. Now imagine this particular video that we're doing, which alhamdulillah, there's a lot of people here from all across the world, especially involved in dawah. They're going to go through comments and they're going to see stuff like this, especially if they went live. Guys, you're getting carried away, right? The problem with Young Spook is I've never seen him before. I recognize a lot of the people here because I go live every single day. But the people who are leaving comments like this, if you look at this comment, it's very clever. It's not saying you're wrong. It's saying, oh, you're getting carried away. But it's from somebody that we don't recognize. And fundamentally, what are we saying that hasn't already been verified? China covered up. China has a troll army. There's people who've done documentaries on this. There's people who've done videos on this. Sky News Australia, they did this whole thing about the cover up. So we're not saying anything different. These people sometimes they're like, they're just spamming.
But the thing is, as I mentioned, I just want to let your viewers know everything that we've said is out on Western media. You can literally Google this and find all of this. But because unless you saw it when it initially came out, it gets lost within all the other articles and everything else is written. Now, Twitter is so good because when these guys end up commenting on Twitter, you go to their account and you realize that they opened that Twitter account like yesterday. They've got 0 followers. So that's how you know whether they're trolling you or not. Now, a small population of them are genuine, patriotic, nationalistic Chinese that don't get a cent from anywhere. They do it because they've been brainwashed. But then you've got this huge social media army that are there. And again, it's all to save face. And as I mentioned before, say your video, you might get an average of 100 or 200 comments. When you start getting 1,000 comments, you'll be, oh, what's going on here? Like, people are interested. Like, I wonder what they talked about. So again, this is promoting. I hope that they don't delete their comments after I say this, but it's great promotion.
It is. And look, at the end of the day, when I think about this, I think that, I love reading history. I love reading, the history of the early Islamic civilization. I'm aware of how Islam spread in, modern day Kazakhstan after the Battle of Talis. And I honestly, one of the greatest pains for this ummah is that an entire area, Andalusia, was completely wiped out from the perspective that they were forced to become Christian, or they were killed, or they were, they had to run away to Morocco. And we think to ourselves, till today, every single year, till today in Egypt, there is a protest against the Muslims being kicked out of Andalusia. And that was 800 years ago. 800 years ago, yeah? I think it's 800 years ago. Or is it? No, 600, 500. I've forgotten. Anyway.
100, yeah.
This is, No, sorry. Muslims ran Spain for 800 years, and then since the 1400s, like 600 years, right? When the Ottomans were rising, the Spaniards were kicking out the Muslims. Now I think to myself, why are we sad? We're sad because there's a place where there's millions of people who are Muslim. There was Azan. This was a place of scholars. This was a place in which you had great Islamic personalities, great Islamic culture, right in the center of the world, essentially, because between Africa and Europe. And then I think to myself, why are we sulking about something that happened hundreds of years ago and something's happening before our very eyes?
Exactly.
People have been Muslim for hundreds of years, right? The masajid in East Turkestan, which are hundreds of years old, they now have animals living in them. They use them for discos. Some of them have been turned into car parks, and some of them become into museum for Han Chinese to walk around. And we're still crying about Andalusia hundreds of years ago. What about Andalusia that's happening right now? Yeah. What about something that's happening right before our very eyes? And I'm trying to wake up Muslims to this reality that, guys, this is happening right here, right now. Yeah, this isn't a matter of like, look, if you're a Muslim in a certain part of the world and you're being oppressed and you're being killed, alhamdulillah, you're being killed. That's not the worst that can happen. Yeah. The worst that can happen is you're alive and your wife is raped, your mother is raped, your children are taken away, old people. Just yesterday, I saw a video of an old man in East Turkestan with one of these big hats with a white beard, and he was forced to drink alcohol.
Yeah.
That man probably never, ever drank alcohol in his life. Yeah. I saw a video of an old woman. She had a scarf on, and she noticed somebody was filming her, and she took it off.
Yeah.
This is the level of oppression. This is not a joke. This is serious, serious stuff. And I'm honestly thinking to myself, and it frustrates me, Arslan, that I'm thinking, why is nobody shouting about this? And I decided to shout about it because I started to realize, hang on a second, why am I looking up to somebody else to start speaking? Yeah. I'm only going to be accountable for myself. Yeah. And I honestly believe that we're going to be accountable on the day of judgment. That Allah's going to say, you had social media, you had the power to make a change, but you didn't.
Yeah. Yeah, to answer that, number one, because as I mentioned before, China's far, China is unknown. And even when we talk about China, Islam in China, it's very like mystic, oh, you know, what a story. But for example, something like Andalusia, it played a role in the Islamic Empire and a lot through just general world history. And with Palestine, you have Al-Quds. It is in the Quran. You know, the ayah of the Yahud and, you know, the Muslim. It's the third holiest place for the Muslims. So this is why it gets a lot of attention. If, unfortunately, people have to realize, if the Palestinians or Palestine, if there was no Al-Quds there, Palestine wouldn't be an issue. It would be like us. The only reason Palestine gets coverage or Muslims find it is important, because there is ayah in Quran for it. This is the only reason.
No, absolutely. Now, I wanted to ask you a question, and this is a very good question. And this actually, in the beginning, when I started researching China and what's happening in East Turkestan, this is something which I had to think about as well. So one of the brothers, Jordan, and he's, mashallah, a revert to Islam who's very active, but he's asked a very valid question here. Yeah. So he said, we can't pick and choose when to use the Western media. When they discuss the Middle East, we don't believe them. When they discuss China, we do believe them. And that's a doubt that I've had myself. So how would you address, like, how do we bypass that if that's something that concerns us?
Okay. Forget the Western media for the past 3 years then. Do you think this oppression has only been happening for 30 years? For 3 years? Again, we have 260 years. Go and read, go and find out. Again, a big question. Don't believe me. Don't believe Brother Sabur. Don't believe Western media. Go to that place by yourself. Walk into a mosque. Try and talk to the people. Get your phone out and have someone. It's going to be very difficult. Get a Chinese friend. Try and interview a Uyghur. See if they will meet with you. Try and interview a Uyghur, right? And watch in 5 minutes. In 5 minutes, you will have people following you. I used to be able to go to East Turkestan. How come the Chinese government, they won't give me a visa? I talked to you, if you guys didn't watch, I talked to Brother Sabur a couple of weeks ago. My father-in-law is a famous actor and comedian.
Yeah.
Type in his name into YouTube. His name is Adil Mijit. Adil Mijit. All the Uyghurs know him. He's the equivalent to Jim Carrey. In the UK, you've got Michael McIntyre. He's the equivalent to that. He was in a concentration camp. He was sent to a concentration camp 1 day after my second daughter was born. Do it. Look, don't believe me. I'm a liar. Don't believe me. Do it. Ask yourself.
And this is also very important to understand that the actual people who are being put in these camps,
Yeah.
it's not that, oh, somebody is an extremist or this or this or this. Firstly, what we got to understand, right, and this is extremely, I'm actually having a brother who's going to join us in a few days who's actually done a PhD from Exeter University, and he's an expert in extremism. You can get extremism when, say, somebody is ignorant of Islam, right?
Yeah.
But this place has scholars that go back hundreds of years. They have a traditional authority. It's not like, fractured where you have different schisms, right? They all are Hanafis. They all follow the same sort of Islam. So it's not like, you have this different problem with like ISIS or something. Like these things, it's not there. What you do have is that if you have a beard, if you have a hijab, if you have these things, then you're going to be stuck in a camp. But that was maybe a couple of years ago. Now, anybody with any sign of being Uyghur, any sign, right, wearing the hat, doing this or doing that, they're going to be stuck. In the documentary that I actually saw, which, by the way, you can go see independent documentaries on this if you don't want to trust the Western media, yeah? The woman that was put in prison, she was put in prison because she had WhatsApp, and that's illegal. She had illegally downloaded it. Yeah. So these things that we're talking about, I know, and this is why we're having a bit of an uphill struggle. That there, when it comes to the Western media, there is selective outrage. So something happens in Gaza, there's not really much noise, and then there's a lot. They're making noise about the Uyghur situation. But I would say this thing very importantly: the Uyghur situation, they're highlighting potentially because right now they see China as an adversary.
Yeah.
Right? But I want you guys to recognize that even if that wasn't the case, the zulm that's happening there is happening. Yeah. And if they've actually giving you a story, look at it with some salt. Yeah, fair enough. Look at it with some salt. But just the fact that it's coming from the Western media shouldn't be a good enough reason for you to say, forget it. In fact, what's interesting is people of Hong Kong and people of Taiwan, that's not the Western media, they are speaking against this. Yeah? So if you don't trust the Western media, you can trust the Hong Kong media, the people who are actually close to that region. And you'll find many media outlets in Hong Kong who are speaking about the Uyghur situation. In fact, during the protests that were actually happening in Hong Kong, they were actually wearing Uyghur masks.
Yeah.
Right? So there's a solidarity movement, and you'll even find Tibet activists. And I wanted to ask you this question. Why is it that Tibet is like so important, even though the oppression in Tibet is of course it's there, but it's a lot less than East Turkestan. Tibet, you have people like Brad Pitt who made a film about it, and you've got all this noise about Tibet for the last 50 years, and East Turkestan, which is much worse, there's not much going on. Why this discrepancy?
Well, again, I don't want to sound prejudiced, but if you look at him, there, the Dalai Lama is his persona, his character. We know Buddhists. We've seen Rohingya and all this, but before that, we know Buddhists as these cuddly Buddhists. Peace-loving. How could these cuddly Buddhists? How could they be causing trouble? And it was especially during that sort of hippie era, 80s, like the West were looking. They were, especially in the United States, they were going away from separating state and church, and people wanted to find new ways of dealing with whatever issues, like psychological. Going into these trends. You had people going into India and being one and finding different sort of religions and expressing themselves. So that was quite popular. But for the longest time, especially with Afghanistan, we were put into, we look like, like we're Muslims, and Muslims, especially in the latter half, especially 80s, 90s, 2000s, obviously, we didn't get, especially when the war on terror was launched. Following George Bush, China said themselves, we have Muslims as well. We have this in our backyard. And that was a huge excuse. So that's why you don't get, it's not popular to be backing Muslims, but now it is popular, for example, to be backing Palestine and things like this. But yeah, we haven't had that sort of popular backing. The most popular backing that we had was with Mesut Özil a few months ago, where he posted a tweet of 2 images. He made a dua, saying, typical dua to for Allah to protect the Muslims of East Turkestan, and I'm sure if you type in Mesut Özil China into Google, the hate that he got, anti-Islamic hate, terrorist, anti-Turkic hate, anti-Turkish hate, and we were talking about, should we trust the Western media? I mean, Subur, I believe you're ethnically Pakistani, and I'm sure you have many Pakistani followers. There are a lot of Pakistani people watching from the UK. Listen to the stories of the Pakistani men who married Uyghur women. Their wives were jailed because their husbands were Pakistani. Eventually, a lot of them did free their wives, but read those stories. Are your fellow Pakistani brothers, are they lying to you? Read those stories. It's very heartbreaking. And this is real.
No, absolutely. Yeah. And, I just wanted to highlight here that the personal stories that you're going to get, they're going to be 100%. They're going to reconfirm everything that's just been said. So some people are actually saying that they have friends directly who are Uyghur, and they are basically saying exactly what you've just been saying. And we've been getting that in the comment section as well. This is something that I mentioned earlier, that my first experience of the Uyghur situation was 2011. And everything that's being done today, it wasn't being done, as in there wasn't concentration camps, but the oppression in terms of discouraging people from saying Assalamu alaikum, putting in incentives for people not to go to the mosque. You have to be a certain age to go to the mosque. All these things were there. They only decided to just ramp it up. Now I wanted to read out these funny things that our little friend's been saying, right? Hong Kong media is pro-West, right? What do you think of that?
I mean, if he's saying the West cover it a lot, and I mean, we have to be honest as well. Obviously, countries like the United States do use Hong Kong, Tibet, and the Uyghurs for their own gain to get their extra 5 to 10% in trade deals. This is a given. But at the same time, it does exist. And I know, especially coming from a Muslim background, you think, well, America has been bombing the hell out of Muslim lands for the past 20 years. How can we ever believe these guys? Guys, you got to remember, in politics, your enemy doesn't remain your enemy forever. There's always changing of guard and changing of hands. So, obviously, condemn. I mean, we condemn. We live in the free world. We condemn our governments for stuff that they do wrong. But when they do or they talk the truth, then we got to back them up. I mean, it's just reality. I know, even I'm turning 33 this year. Even me, 10, 15 years ago, I was your typical, like, Allahu Akbar, you understand what I mean? Like BDS this and, like Free Palestine. I was with that. But as you grow up, you understand a bit of politics, you read some books and you go, you know what? It's not clear cut, Muslims versus the kuffar. It's not that clear. There's money involved, there's trade deals and oil, and there's many things that you got to look into.
Definitely. And this is something which I always try and tell my viewers, that the good Muslims don't look at the world through a black and white lens, right? The Prophet ﷺ, he didn't treat Abu Jahl and Suhail bin Amr in the same way. In fact, when Suhail bin Amr radiallahu anhu later on became a Muslim, when he was caught, and he was a great eloquent speaker, and one of the Sahaba, they wanted to like rip out his teeth or something, or do something cruel to him, the Prophet said no, because I don't remember exactly the wording of the Prophet ﷺ, but he didn't want to disfigure, because he didn't want Allah to disfigure him, right? And that person later on became a Muslim. So we have this thing. And even the Prophet ﷺ, when he became a prophet, And there was the treaty which happened before he was a prophet, in which the pagans came together to protect the rights of other people, merchants that came within Makkah. The Prophet ﷺ said, if I was if that treaty, if I was given a chance to do it, I'll do it again. Yeah. What we got to recognize is that, firstly, and I say this to my viewers all the time, I say there's many good things in the Western world, and those good things are traced to Christianity. Yeah, they're not traced to atheism, right? Secondly, we have to understand even the relationship between the last Islamic empire, right, which was the Ottomans, and the West. It wasn't always they were against each other. There was the Boer War, in which you had the Crimean War, in which you had a situation where the Allies were together with Ottomans against the Russians. You also had a situation where the Ottomans made an alliance with France. You also had a situation where the Germans were friends with the Ottomans. So even our khulafa, even the people of the past, they weren't just like, yeah, kuffar all the same. Yeah. So we've got to understand, if there are people, sincere people in the Western world who are speaking about the Uyghurs, we shouldn't just say, well, they're not, we can't really trust them because they're not as loud as speaking out against someone else. We need to use the fact that, they are very good people, are very moral people, and just like those same moral people, we elicit their support for Palestine. Yeah. If you look at Palestinian marches, and I've been to many marches in the UK, you will always see lefty, white, liberal people right at the front shouting the loudest. Yeah, they support the Muslims. Why shouldn't we elicit the same support for East Turkestan? Yeah, what's the difference here? We need to use every single resource as possible. And what I fear, I'm the same age as you, I'm 35, right? I fear is in our lifetimes, by the time we're, say, 51, there will be no Uyghurs to talk about. Yeah, because the Uyghur women, are being married off to Han men. Yeah, they're getting killed. Their children are being raised in these. You can only call them poultry farms, right? Just crammed together. What will be their situation? Will there be anyone to say La ilaha illallah? Except an Arab tourist that comes over for the Olympics or something. Yeah, it's all going to be finished. And this is the thing that we are going to be accountable for. All of us, all day during the lockdown, we're on our social media. Take out a few minutes, start sharing, and all of this will add up.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, this same guy, Chakib, he keeps putting in comments like,
we're going to make you famous.
Yeah, I'm just trying to show people how they distract people, right? So he's talking about, supporting America and Europe to take our oil. Then he's saying China did nothing to me. So I want to ask you this last thing, because obviously we've gone on for some time now. And apologies to everyone that I started late today, but I actually had an emergency. Normally, I always start on time. But I want to end off on this point. Now, as Muslims, we're taught by the Prophet ﷺ, we're taught by the Quran, and we know that despairing of Allah's mercy is haram. It is haram to despair of Allah's mercy, in the same way it's haram to eat pork or do something else. So it's haram to lose hope. But sometimes when you look at the situation of East Turkestan, I myself start to think to myself, maybe all that we're doing is going to do damage, but it's not going to save the situation. What's something that we can take hope in from maybe history or something that that we can actually make a difference in the world?
Well, look at when the Mongolians came into Baghdad. I mean, everyone knows the history about that. The Mongolians came in, slaughtered a good 80, I don't remember the figures, 80-90% of the Muslims. You had a very tiny population that eventually flourished into, it became the Ottoman Empire. Those Mongol Turk hybrid people eventually, made the strongest Islamic civilization in the world. And in the Quran, it talks about the ant doing its bit to put out the fire. I mean, it's cliche. I mean, we always use this ayah for these things, but Allah doesn't give us this ayah, and people don't use it for no. There's a reason why these ayat exist. And a domino effect, like even from one person's movement. And you look at people in history, you look at not necessarily, I mean, we've got many people in history, but I'm talking about recent history, like people like Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, like these individuals. I mean, you could be the one that actually, starts a movement, starts an organization. I mean, it's so, Allah has made it so easy now. I mean, to be honest, I was on a talk show yesterday like this, and I was saying, look, I've got an iPhone 6. Okay, this phone was made in 2015. I'm using a 5-year-old phone, and I'm basically doing my battles with this. People are on iPhone 8s, X's, 11s, iPhone 15s, or whatever. But I mean, you're using on Instagram. You're showing. You know what I mean? Like, do something useful in this world, and it's not nothing. I mean, inshallah ta'ala, I hope the stuff that we do on social media, I don't hear people saying this enough. I hope it does count towards our ibadah.
Of course it does.
Yeah. And the month of Ramadan is coming up, and people think the month of Ramadan is just fasting and tarawih. Yes, but you remember, and correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of our Sahaba, a lot of battles did happen during the month of Ramadan. I mean, this is also a form of jihad, and think of it as worship. This is what I would leave people with, for Muslims especially.
And there's this thing that, this social media struggle that we're doing against China, nobody is going to basically look at these actions that we're doing and is going to call us an extremist or this or this or this. Sometimes Muslims worry about that. If you are worried about that, I want you to recognize something. Eventually they'll come for you. It's about divide and conquer. It's about, okay, they came for these group of people. Okay, I'm not going to talk. These group of people, I'm not going to talk. These group of people, I'm not going to talk. I want you to basically realize something, that we have a responsibility. We have a responsibility. And this is a great responsibility. And every single time that, I find myself sometimes scrolling through Facebook, we spend a lot of our time just scrolling. And when we think of like Ramadan's coming, okay, I need to read Quran, I need to do this, I need to do that. We have this tendency, I don't know why it is, that anything that's political in nature, that's not ibadah. Ibadah is when you're in a vacuum. You got wudu, you're wearing a hat, you're reading the Quran. Ibadah is about the real world, about what's happening within the real world. I mean, if you think about it, the person who cleans the mosque of the Prophet ﷺ, the physical action, and they're the only people right now who are getting to pray there. None of us. The fact is that being an activist for East Turkestan, this is an act of worship. This is a struggle. And you're going to get ajr for this. This is, and alhamdulillah, I'm not saying, I've achieved anything, but within my own few circles, people are getting shocked. Like, they've never heard of East Turkestan. They've never heard of this. They never heard of that. And that's just me, a little person with my little following. Imagine if everybody did this. Just like the coronavirus, it'll start spreading. It'll start spreading everywhere. And as Arslan said, look back in our history, the Mongols came. We thought Islam's going to end. It didn't. So, we're not going to lose hope. And that was a really beautiful message.
I'll just add one more thing. If you guys realized years ago, I mean, talking about Islam, especially when you got a little bit dicey with your comments or your sharing, you would lose your account, or you would lose. I mean, I actually lost my Facebook account years ago because I was sharing like anti-Israeli things, and they blocked me from Facebook. But when you talk about East Turkestan, the opposite will happen. You'll get support, and your tweets will go online. Like this is historic, because right now, if you share stuff on Uyghur Muslims of East Turkestan, you will be supported. Like it's not like before. When you're on Afghanistan and Palestine, you'd be attacked by everybody, by the right, by government, by all these organizations. But no, now even the likes of I forget Oz Israeli, The guy, like, I mean, that guy's full on anti-Muslim, right? The people, the likes of, what's his name? This Imam Tawheed. I know these guys because they're Australian. These guys are anti-Islam. But even these guys, right? Yani, you may hate me for this, but they are speaking the haqq on this Chinese issue, but only on this. People, don't get me wrong here. They are, and you may have realized this. I do comment and share bits of, say, these people based on only the Chinese issue, and they think, no, like, these guys are anti. Don't you think I'm dumb? You think I don't follow people the likes of Muhammad Hijab or Ali Dawa or Sabur? I know how anti-Islam these guys are, but when it comes to China, they're speaking correct. Yani, like, I sometimes get uncomfortable when I share their things, but I'm like, it's the haqq, dude. Like, I will eventually, when my people become free, I will debate these guys and I'll be anti them. But right now, like, I gotta find friends wherever I can. Yani, people might mistake me, but this is my view on this. My people are being killed, man.
And you know what's funny about this is that I've been sharing a lot of stuff of Trump, right?
Yeah, me.
And I'm not even kidding you, yeah?
Yeah.
I actually liked Trump right from the beginning for one simple reason.
Yeah.
You see, when Obama came to power, he was sweet talking, but he was sending out more drones than anybody else.
Yeah.
Right? Trump came to power. What you see is what you got.
Yeah.
He wasn't two-faced. Yeah?
Yeah.
What he felt inside, he said. Yeah. So that's why I respected him. Yeah. Not because he's obviously anti-Muslim. I'm not going to love him, but I would say this: with anything, yeah, he's direct. So whether it's the trade deal with China, whether it's NATO, he's direct. On this issue to do with China, I've been sharing his stuff because, to be honest, other Western leaders, Boris Johnson, Macron, and others, they've been sugarcoating their comments. But you know what they're trying to get to.
Yeah.
I think everybody's been upset at China. But
Yeah.
he's just been vocal. So regardless whether we like him or not, because what we got to remember, when the Prophet ﷺ, during his lifetime, the Romans were fighting the Persians, right? Everybody knows this incident, The Romans were fighting the Persians, and there was a great battle. The Prophet ﷺ made dua for the Romans against the Persians. And you think, why? Why? They eventually had to fight the Romans, But the Romans were closer to them than the Persians. And the mushriks were supporting the Persians. Now, Allah himself says in the Quran, the closest to the believers are those who say we are Christian. Regardless of if North American evangelical Christianity is sometimes anti-Islam, usually Christians are pro-Islam. I felt this in the UK. Vast majority of the Catholics and the Protestants, and you get born-agains who are anti-Muslim. You do get that, missionaries. But generally, Christians are pro-Muslim compared to other groups. They just are. And even in the Quran, Allah says they're the closest. So if we have people like that, nothing wrong with sharing their content, nothing wrong with doing their thing. In fact, the way I think about this, and I've been saying this again and again, I'll repeat it, I don't think we'll ever get an opportunity to help the people of East Turkestan like right now. I don't think we're going to get this opportunity again. This is why we have to go ape. Mind the pun, we have to go ape and try and make as much noise as possible. So I'm not going to take any more time of yourself, Arslan. Of course, I'm going to talk to you when the live stream's over. But I'd like to thank you for joining us on the live stream. I've put down Talk to East Turkestan and Arslan Hidayat, his Facebook and his Twitter handle in the description. Follow him, retweet the stuff, and share this with everybody that you know. And inshallah, the next time we're going to have Arslan is going to be in Ramadan. And of course, we're going to be speaking not about soccer, we're going to be speaking about something far more important. Jazakallah khair.
Jazakallah khair, everyone. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum.